Annie's mornings didn't begin with sunlight or calm, they began with noise. Not the kind you could hear with your ears, but the kind that lived inside her head, whispering, questioning, replaying, doubting. It started the moment her eyes opened, even before she fully registered the warmth of her blanket or the faint light slipping through the curtains. Did I say something wrong yesterday? Why did she pause before replying? What if they think I'm awkward? What if I made a mistake and didn't notice? Her thoughts didn't knock before entering, they rushed in like an uninvited crowd, loud and persistent. She lay still in bed, staring at the ceiling, her chest already tight before the day had even begun. It wasn't that anything bad had happened. In fact, nothing had happened at all. But to Annie, possibility felt just as real as reality. And possibility, in her mind, always leaned toward the worst. Annie lived in a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood. It was simple, cozy even, with warm-toned walls and a small balcony that overlooked a row of trees. Anyone visiting might say it felt peaceful. But Annie rarely felt that peace. She walked into her kitchen, poured herself a cup of tea, and stood there, staring at the steam rising from the mug. Even this small moment wasn't safe from her thoughts. Did I lock the door last night? What if I forgot to turn something off? What if something goes wrong today? She walked back to the door and checked the lock. Once. Then twice. Still, the unease didn't leave. Her phone buzzed on the table. A message from a friend, "Hey, are you free later?" Annie stared at the message for a long time. She typed, deleted, typed again. "Yeah, maybe." "What's up?" "Delete." "I think so, what do you want to do?" "Delete." "Sure." "Delete." Her thumbs hovered over the screen as her mind spiraled. What if I sound too eager? What if I sound uninterested? What if they think I don't want to meet? What if I say yes and then feel drained? 5 minutes passed. Then 10. The message still wasn't sent. Overthinking had a way of freezing her, not just her actions, but her sense of self. It wasn't just decisions. It was everything. Conversations replayed in her head hours after they ended. Choices, no matter how small, felt like life-altering risks. Silences from others became stories of rejection. Annie wasn't weak. She wasn't incapable. She was just, trapped in her own mind. That afternoon, she stepped outside, hoping fresh air might quiet the noise. The sky was pale blue, and a soft breeze moved through the trees. People walked by casually, some talking, some laughing, others simply existing without visible tension. Annie watched them. How do they do that? She wondered. How do they just live? She sat on a bench and tried to focus on her surroundings. The sound of leaves. The distant hum of traffic. The rhythm of footsteps passing by. For a brief moment, her mind slowed. But then. You're sitting weird. Someone might be watching you. What if you look uncomfortable? The peace shattered. Later that evening, Annie stood in front of her mirror. She studied her reflection, not with kindness, but with analysis. Why did I say that earlier? Why do I always overthink everything? Why can't I just be normal? Her shoulders dropped. It wasn't just the thoughts themselves, it was the frustration of not being able to stop them. That's what made it exhausting. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her room was dark, but her mind was wide awake, replaying moments from the day. The unsent message, the way she sat on the bench. A random memory from weeks ago. Her thoughts stitched together scenarios that didn't exist. What if everything I'm doing is wrong? What if I'm ruining things without realizing? She turned to her side, then the other. Pulled the blanket closer. Closed her eyes tighter. Nothing worked. At some point, she sat up and sighed. I can't keep doing this, she whispered into the quiet room. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a breakdown. It was something quieter. Something more honest. A realization. The next morning didn't feel magically different. The thoughts were still there. But something small had shifted. Instead of immediately reacting to them, Annie paused. She sat at the edge of her bed and listened. Not to the thoughts themselves, but to the space between them. It was faint, almost invisible. But it was there. She picked up her phone again. The message from yesterday still waited. Her mind started again. What should I say? What if? She stopped herself. Took a breath. Then typed, "Yeah, I'm free. Let me know." Smiling face with smiling eyes. And before her thoughts could interrupt, she pressed send. Her heart raced. For a moment, panic rose. Was that okay? Should I have said something else? But then something unexpected happened. Nothing. The world didn't collapse. No immediate rejection. No disaster. Just silence. Normal, ordinary silence. Annie leaned back against the wall. Her chest still felt tight, but underneath it, there was something else. Something unfamiliar. Something small. Relief. That day, Annie didn't stop overthinking completely. She still questioned things. Still replayed moments. Still felt the pull of her mind trying to take control. But now, there was a tiny gap. A moment where she could choose. Not always. But sometimes. And sometimes, was a beginning. The change didn't happen all at once. If anything, it was frustratingly slow. The day Annie sent that simple message and survived the wave of overthinking that followed should have felt like a victory, but her mind didn't celebrate it. Instead, it searched for cracks. You got lucky. Next time you'll mess it up. Don't get comfortable. But something inside Annie had already shifted. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough to make her question her thoughts, instead of blindly believing them. The next few days followed a similar pattern. Overthinking still showed up, early in the morning, late at night, in the middle of conversations, during quiet moments. It didn't disappear just because Annie wanted it to. But now, she noticed it. And that changed everything. One afternoon, Annie sat by her balcony with her tea, watching the trees sway gently in the breeze. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. Another moment. Her body tensed automatically, like it always did. Her mind started building possibilities, layering meaning into something simple. What if this leads to something awkward? What if I don't respond the right way again? Her fingers hovered. Then she paused. Not because the thoughts stopped, but because she remembered something. Just because you think it, doesn't mean it's true. The idea felt strange. Almost wrong. She had spent so long trusting every thought that questioning them felt unnatural, like breaking a rule she didn't know she had agreed to. Still, she tried. Instead of reacting immediately, Annie set her phone down. She took a slow breath. Then another. The thoughts didn't vanish, but they softened, just enough for her to see them more clearly. They weren't facts. They were fears. That realization stayed with her. And over the next few days, Annie began experimenting, not with perfection, but with awareness. She started small. Very small. When her mind replayed a conversation, she didn't try to force it to stop. Instead, she gently asked herself, is this helping me right now? Most of the time, the answer was no. And for the first time, she gave herself permission to step away from the thought, even if it tried to pull her back. At first, it didn't work well. Her mind was persistent. It would circle back, louder than before. You're avoiding something important. What if you're missing something? And sometimes, she gave in. Sometimes she spent hours analyzing, just like before. But something was different now. Even when she got pulled back into overthinking, she recognized it sooner. She didn't stay stuck as long. One evening, Annie went for a walk. Not to escape her thoughts, but to sit with them differently. The sky was painted in soft shades of orange and pink, the kind of quiet beauty she used to miss because her mind was always somewhere else. This time, she tried something new. Instead of fighting her thoughts, she let them be there. All of them. The doubts. The what-ifs. The endless questions. But she didn't chase them. She just walked. At first, it felt uncomfortable. Like leaving a conversation unfinished. Her mind kept nudging her, "You're not done thinking about this. Come back to it." But Annie kept walking. Step by step. Breath by breath. Then something subtle happened. The thoughts didn't disappear, but they lost their urgency. They were still there, just quieter. Like background noise instead of a command. Annie stopped near a small park and sat on a bench. This time, when her mind whispered, "You're sitting weird. Someone might notice you." She didn't immediately react. She looked around. No one was paying attention. People were busy with their own lives, their own thoughts, their own worlds. And for the first time, Annie considered something she had never fully believed before: maybe it's not all about me. Not in a negative way. In a freeing way. That night, her thoughts returned as they always did. But Annie responded differently. Instead of trying to solve every thought before sleeping, she told herself, "I don't need to figure everything out right now." It felt incomplete. Uncomfortable. But also, lighter. Days turned into weeks, and Annie began building small habits, not to eliminate overthinking, but to manage it. She started writing things down. Whenever her mind felt too full, she grabbed a notebook and poured everything onto the page. Messy. Unfiltered. Honest. At first, it was chaotic. But then she noticed something surprising. Once the thoughts were on paper, they didn't feel as heavy in her mind. They looked different outside her head. Less powerful. Less real. She also began setting limits. Not strict rules, but gentle boundaries. If I'm still thinking about this after 10 minutes, I'll let it go for now. Sometimes she followed through. Sometimes she didn't. But even trying created space. And slowly, Annie started doing something she hadn't done in a long time. She started trusting herself. Not perfectly. Not completely. But enough to take small steps without needing absolute certainty. One afternoon, she met her friend. The same kind of situation that used to spiral into endless overthinking. Before leaving, her mind started again. What if it's awkward? What if you don't know what to say? She took a breath. And instead of canceling, instead of over-preparing, she went anyway. The conversation wasn't perfect. There were pauses. Moments of uncertainty. But there were also laughs. Genuine ones. And afterward, as Annie walked home, her mind tried to replay everything. To analyze every word. To find mistakes. But this time, she interrupted the pattern. Not harshly. Just firmly. It's okay. It's done. That sentence became something she returned to often. A small anchor. A reminder that not everything needed to be revisited, reanalyzed, or reimagined. One night, as Annie sat by her window, she realized something important. Overthinking wasn't the enemy. It had been her mind's way of trying to protect her. To prepare her. To keep her from making mistakes. But it had gone too far. It had stopped protecting her, and started controlling her. And now, she was learning something new. Not how to silence her mind completely. But how to live alongside it without being ruled by it. It wasn't perfect. There were still hard days. Days when her thoughts felt louder, heavier, harder to manage. But there were also days. Moments. Where she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not the kind that comes from everything being perfect, but the kind that comes from not needing everything to be. And for Annie, that was enough. For now. Clarity didn't arrive like a sudden breakthrough. It didn't come with a moment where everything finally made sense, where Annie woke up one morning and felt completely free from the noise in her mind. Instead, it came quietly. In small, almost unnoticeable shifts. In the way she paused before reacting. In the way she chose not to follow every thought. In the way she allowed things to be unfinished. There were still mornings when the noise returned. What if today goes wrong? What if I fall back into old patterns? But now, Annie didn't panic when those thoughts appeared. She recognized them. Just thoughts, she whispered to herself as she stood by the window, watching the early sunlight stretch across the floor. And somehow, naming them made them feel smaller. She no longer tried to control every outcome. That had been her biggest struggle, this constant need to predict, prepare, and perfect everything before it even happened. But life didn't work that way. It never had. And now, she was finally beginning to accept that. One afternoon, Annie found herself sitting in a cafe, alone. Not because she had no one to be with, but because she wanted to be there. That alone was new. Before, being alone meant being trapped with her thoughts. Now, it felt different. Not silent, but spacious. She watched people move in and out, the soft hum of conversations blending with the clinking of cups. Her mind tried, briefly, to pull her back. Are you sitting okay? What if someone is judging you? She took a sip of her coffee. Let the thought pass. Didn't argue with it. Didn't follow it. Just, let it exist and fade. And it did. That was the biggest change. Not that her thoughts disappeared, but that they no longer stayed. Weeks passed, and Annie's world began to expand in ways she hadn't expected. Not because her life suddenly became extraordinary, but because she was finally present for it. She started saying yes to things without overanalyzing every detail. Not reckless yes, but free yes. She took walks without turning them into thinking sessions. She listened to conversations without rehearsing responses in her head. She made decisions without needing absolute certainty. And sometimes, things didn't go perfectly. There were awkward moments. Small mistakes. Situations that didn't unfold the way she had hoped. But here's what surprised her the most, she handled them. Without spiraling. Without replaying them for hours. Without turning them into proof that something was wrong with her. One evening, Annie sat on the same bench she had once avoided. The same place where her thoughts had once been overwhelming, loud, and relentless. The sky was fading into soft shades of blue and gray, the air calm and steady. She took a deep breath. Her mind was quiet. Not empty, just calm. She smiled slightly, not because everything was perfect, but because she could feel the difference. She remembered the version of herself who sat here before. The one who couldn't sit still without analyzing everything. The one who felt watched, judged, overwhelmed by thoughts that never seemed to stop. And now, she was still the same person. But also, not. Because she had learned something powerful, she didn't need to control her thoughts to feel okay. She didn't need to solve every what if. She didn't need to chase certainty to feel safe. She just needed to let go. Not completely. Not all at once. But little by little. Moment by moment. Her phone buzzed. A message. She picked it up, read it, and smiled. No overthinking. No long pause. She replied naturally. Easily. And then she put her phone down. No second guessing. No replaying. Just peace. Later that night, Annie stood by her mirror again. The same place where she once questioned everything about herself. She looked at her reflection. Not critically. Not analytically. Just, honestly. "I'm okay," she said softly. And this time, she believed it. Overthinking hadn't completely disappeared from her life. It still showed up sometimes, especially in moments of stress or uncertainty. But now, it didn't control her. It didn't define her. It was just a part of her mind. Not the voice she had to follow. And that made all the difference. As Annie lay in bed that night, her thoughts drifted in and out, softer now, less demanding. She didn't chase them. Didn't fight them. Didn't try to figure everything out before sleep. She simply closed her eyes. And let the day end. For the first time in a long time. Her mind didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like a place she could rest. And in that quiet, gentle stillness, Annie finally understood something she had been searching for all along. Peace wasn't about having no thoughts. It was about not being controlled by them.